says an awful lot about our guest speaker, to say the least, that all of you had joined us here this morning. I want to thank a couple of New England Council members who were very generous in sponsoring today's program, PNC Bank, as well as EOS Foundation, which is headed by the CEO here, Andrea Silver, who will introduce the very special guest in just a moment. Today is our second event of the new year, our first here in Massachusetts. We have a very busy calendar in the next couple of weeks. Here in New England, looking forward to Capitol Hill program with Representative Ayanna Presley and Representative Gabe Amo. In Washington, D.C., we're going to host a breakfast with Congressman Seth Magaziner later this month. And on January 31st, we will host the inaugural event for a new Rising Star Network for young professionals. We're very excited about this new initiative. Look forward to engaging the next generation of business leaders in the Council's activities. I have been told I am not young and I'm not a professional, so I don't know if I will be invited, but I hope to be. We'll be opening registration, believe it or not, for our 2024 Washington Leaders Conference in just a few weeks. The conference will take place on May 15th and 16th. Look forward to another busy and very productive couple of days in the nation's capital. But today we're very honored to welcome again the House Minority Whip, the 5th Congressional Leader of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and that's Representative Katherine Clark. Thanks again for joining us here this morning. I'm pleased now to introduce Andrea Silver to do a very formal introduction.
I just got back from LA, so the snow was fabulous. I just want to say what an honor it is to introduce my friend, Katherine Clark, who I've known, I think, for 20 years, but let's call it 3. Such an honor to watch her meteoric rise and just watch the fight. And we have so much now at stake. And I just want to thank you for being there, always tough, but always with a smile, making friends on the other side, which still is a thing, and for representing this great state. I want to thank the Council for all its great work and its real focus on diversity over the last few years. We've really increased our association because it's so important to have everybody at the table. And I also want to thank PNC Bank, and I'm so sorry that John Bernstein and Saskia especially were unable to be with us today. And I wouldn't be myself if I didn't take this mic to just give a shout out to 2 incredible women college presidents who are with me today at our table. I'm hoping that Pam Ettinger of Bunker Hill Community College and Chancellor Julie Chen of UMass Lowell could just stand up. Because that's what it's all about. It's all about having diversity at the top and seeing different types of people leading this new generation. And I think Massachusetts and Greater Boston are at the top. Thank you so much.
We have as they put the mic on, we have a few minutes to ask a couple of questions. Some of you kind enough to give me a couple of questions to ask a very special guest, the Minority Whip. First question, obviously, is this week is a big week for you. You're going back to Washington, and you're going to be voting on some type of appropriation to keep the government open. 20% of our government will close the end of January 19th, I think, if we don't have some kind of consensus. Your thoughts on what's going to play out this week?
Yeah, thank you so much. It is great to be here with you. Is that better? We seem to be having some sound issues. All right, great. And thanks to all of you. It is really wonderful to be here with you. It feels like coming home. And just thank you for this incredible turnout on such a snowy day. But as we look at this week, it's a little bit of deja vu. We settled the top lines of this budget back in June when we had the manufactured debt ceiling crisis, the president negotiated at his request with then Speaker Kevin McCarthy, and we voted on it with Democrats supplying the majority of votes, even though it was a negotiated agreement. It wasn't everything that we wanted. But the ink was barely dry when we saw the majority rolling back on what they had just voted and committed to. And so that brought us to a continuing resolution when the budget was due at the end of October that was again carried by Democratic votes. Again in November, when they kicked the can down the road to November, Democrats were the ones who supplied the votes to make sure government stayed open. And that's exactly what's going to happen this week. I don't want to get too much into the process of the House, but in order to pass a rule, typically the majority votes for the rule and the Democrats and the minority vote against a rule. So that is going to fail because they have a very slim majority at this point. They have a 3-vote majority. Next week, that'll drop down to 2. And so what we are seeing is that we will have to supply the 2/3 vote that it is going to take to keep government open and functioning. And it really is, the same, a new year, but the same chaos that we're seeing. But Democrats are committed. We know how bad shutdowns are. And so we have come to an agreement again, conceded a little more to them to make sure that we keep the basic responsibility of government remaining open. And we know it's important to the business community, to our federal employees, to our veterans, to the American people. And it often feels, Jim, like we're on the side of trying to move things forward, extending our hand in bipartisanship whenever we can, and it is just being met with a continuing civil war across the aisle.
So there are members of the far right and the Freedom Caucus who are very upset with the new speaker and how he's making concessions or compromise with the minority party. That going down a step or two further, there may be a member, Marjorie Taylor Greene, or somebody to say, you know what, I think it's time to remove the speaker. So we're going to push him aside. If that ever happened, do you think you and your colleagues would say, you know what, we've had a pretty good relationship. We're going to save him. The Demis will save him. Is that something that's realistic?
I'm not going to get ahead of our caucus and into hypotheticals on that, but I will say this, that when Marjorie Taylor Greene is out there saying, and this was her quote, that bipartisanship is reason enough to vacate a speaker, they are in a very dangerous place. And that's the way our government works. We're supposed to come together. We're supposed to represent our districts, the regions that we come from, and come together with different perspectives and ideologies and come up with a better product that represents a consensus across the country on how to move forward. And when we're in the throes of Trumpism, that we are, what Marjorie Taylor Greene says out loud, unfortunately, is sort of quietly how many of even the more moderate Republicans act, because there is such fear of a primary being brought against you. And that is really what the measure has become, instead of what do the American people need us to do? How do we continue to lower costs? How do we continue to address an issue that is so critical here, the high costs of housing? How do we continue to roll out the investments we've made in infrastructure? All of these pieces are exactly what voters, what people at home want us to be working on. And when we have this dysfunctional majority, it is skewing the bills to issues that the American people are frankly turned off by. And it is really an extremism that has overtaken the House Republican Party that we have to continue to push back on and find those bipartisan opportunities, as rare as they are becoming.
It's been reported that the Ways and Means Committee might be releasing a tax deal on a variety of tax measures that's going to impact our region and the country. Do you have any insight on what will be announced?
Yeah, I mean, it was a good announcement today that they have actually come together. I haven't seen the text. We always wait for Richie Neal to weigh in, but I think that it is a good sign. I know I have heard from many of you in this room about different provisions. We're glad to see that the child tax credit is there with an expansion, as well as R&D and other critical tax policy for this room and for New England in general. And we're also excited about some of the increases in housing and the low-income housing tax credit. So we are eager to see the text as we move forward.
I know that access to quality and affordable child care has been one of your signature issues throughout your time in government. I believe in September you and several of your colleagues introduced the Child Care Stabilization Act. For the benefit of the people who may not be familiar with the piece of legislation, could you give us a little more about it?
Sure. This is another example of the majority in the House taking their eye off of what's important. And as I travel throughout my district, travel throughout the country, child care is one of those issues that the American public is so far ahead of the discussion in the Beltway, especially from the Republican Party. And what we had happen back in September was we went over the child care cliff, and we are asking for $16 billion to make sure that we keep kids in classrooms, that we keep our early educators employed, and that we continue to invest in childcare, because we know it's economic infrastructure. It is not only key to outcomes for the workforce of the future, it is absolutely critical for working families that they are able to access and afford childcare. And that can't be done without the federal government's help. So it is another example of, while they are fighting among themselves, and in the midst of their other vacating the speaker, this key piece of child care funding was allowed to expire. And we saw that with the funding from the American Rescue Plan, $50 billion, the difference it made here in New England, here in Massachusetts, and across the country, in preserving jobs and preserving seats in classrooms for kids, was one that I heard overwhelmingly from the business community is a need that we have to fill. And in the United States, we invest about $500 a year of public funds into toddler care. Other developed countries are investing $15,000. So we are behind in how we look at childcare, but that paradigm is really shifting, and we are going to continue to move it from an old-fashioned view of childcare as just a private decision between a family and a provider, to really understanding and continuing to push how critical this is to our economy succeeding, and to allowing working families to have success as well. So we don't want the greatest celebration of a child entering kindergarten is that finally the majority of child care woes, although we can have a whole nother discussion on after school care, is over for a family. We want families to be able to access that, and at the same time pay a workforce that is overwhelmingly women and women of color a fair wage. And that can only be done with a commitment of federal dollars, and that's exactly what we're going to keep fighting for.
You know, from a energy and environment perspective, New England continues to be a key location for renewable energy companies and projects. We were all very excited when just a couple of weeks ago Vineyard Wind produced its first clean energy. What more do you think that the federal government can or should do to bolster and support the clean energy industry?
Yeah, it is so exciting about Vineyard Wind and about all that is going on here in Massachusetts, whether it is creating green cement to a whole host of other renewable energy projects. And having just put the hottest year on record on the books, this has to be a focus for all of us. And I am very grateful to the Biden administration for their focus on this. And we should mention Senator Kerry as he announces his retirement and his commitment to all that he has done to bring these issues to the forefront. But I think what New England Council knows is not only is this good for the planet, it's good for business. And the opportunities that are presented, the chance that we have here in Massachusetts and in New England to be leaders in the country, not only in our country, but globally, is a tremendous business opportunity for us, and at the same time, absolutely necessary to make sure that we are meeting our carbon goals, that we are, while we are reducing climate and building climate resiliency and reducing the negative effects of climate, we are also looking for those opportunities to be leaders and to create a green economy that I really believe New England can be the national and global leader in. And so we are grateful for the Inflation Reduction Act and that historic investment. And we have to continue to push that. That was a fantastic beginning, but it cannot be the end. We cannot rest on our laurels on that. And we have to resist the very real chipping away of that by the majority in the House. It is their number one priority after a national abortion ban is to undo the IRA. And we all know what it means to the planet and to our economy to continue that funding and expand it.
What do you see a vote coming in the next couple of weeks for aid for Israel as well as Ukraine?
You know, that is very much in flux. It has been put together in the Senate, looking at not only aid to Ukraine, to Taiwan, to Israel, humanitarian aid, but then also they made it a referendum on the border. And Secretary Mayorkas has been negotiating. The administration has been working with the Senate. We are watching and seeing what's going to happen. But Speaker Johnson tipped his hand yesterday when he said we will do nothing on the border until Donald Trump is president. So sometimes they say the quiet part out loud. And what has concerned me is I'm sure there isn't a person in this room who thinks our immigration system is working well. It's not working well for anyone. It is a humanitarian crisis, it is a workforce crisis, and it's a security crisis. So all of these things, you would think this would be an area rich with us being able to come together and work on things together. So this further rejection, unfortunately, highlights that for the House GOP, it is not about solutions, it's about continuing to have a problem that they can run political campaigns on. And it is why I am so committed to taking the majority over again, because we have to get back to actually working on things together. And I know that a security package wouldn't be everything that I wanted, but we have to do more. And it has been so like disheartening doesn't really capture it, but I'll leave it at that. To watch a majority that when we, at the end of last year in the appropriations bill, put in hundreds of millions of dollars to increasing technology so that we can better detect fentanyl coming over, that we know comes right through our ports of entry. That's where it comes in. And not a single Republican vote. And then this past April, they voted to cut 2,000 Border Patrol agents. While we are seeing and hearing from border communities, they need just the opposite. Their absolute refusal to act on the administration's proposals to increase asylum officers, to increase the ability to process people through. And they have rejected everything that creates a path to citizenship. You can't have true border security until we also have a path to citizenship and paths for legal immigration. So we are more than willing to prioritize border security, but this rejection of every single attempt to come to them and negotiate something shows that they are far more interested in keeping the issue hot with voters than actually trying to improve our immigration system.
Well, I'm being told by the staff, they're giving me the look, a mean look, like, hey, we got to
Okay.
move. The Congresswoman has, I believe, a press conference in Malden.
We
in
do on
about
child
15
care with
minutes
the
on
governor.
childcare. So we don't want her to be late announcing some good news, but we want to thank her not only for being here today, but always being available to the New England Council, being accessible, approachable, being very thoughtful, and all of our suggestions. And we just wish you continued success. You have your hands full. I believe this week they may even impeach, I should say, the Secretary of Homeland Security. They seem to be getting the votes and the Freedom Caucus to start the process. So you have your hands full there, but good luck.
On that understatement, we'll leave it.
Well, I could go further and say some people need childcare, but I won't go that far. But again, thank you for all that you do for the Commonwealth and for the nation. And needless to say, we are extremely proud of you.
Oh, thank you, Jim. Thank you so much.
How was that? All right? Okay. Got a little bag here. A little tote bag for you.